guys, welcome back to the 10-8 Fightcast. Not intentionally wearing the same hoodie, but we are wearing the same hoodie, so we'd like to receive no comments about it. Just kind of happened.
You just vibe that way now.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength. So today we're going to be talking about the UFC. Obviously, there is a super big show coming up this weekend in Madison Square Garden, but before we get started on that, we're going to touch on some of the fights we talked about last week, how they shook out, and also some friends of the show victorious down in Charleston, South Carolina. Alexa Connor's returning to action after a big, huge layoff, getting the win in the main event of Conflict down in Charleston. Friend of the show and first ever guest of the 10-8 Fightcast, Sean Kokar, picked up a big win, and so did our friend Chris Gonzo. Right back in the gym last night, and I came by and trained with us last night.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to see him pop in. I knew he'd be coming in for your jiu-jitsu class, and it was a great. I had a great time getting to work with him in a MMA striking class.
Yeah, for sure.
None of us started training.
I think we're definitely going to have him on the show.
Oh,
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the
people.
guy.
The people need to get to know Chris Gonzo a little bit better.
They do.
All right, so main event of last weekend's card: Mariana Rodriguez versus Amanda Lemos. I think a lot of people were favoring Rodriguez in this one, but I was listening to Jack Slack earlier, and he was talking about this fight, and he was just like, "Yeah, I mean, despite this is where women's MMA is at, where you can be the number whatever she was, 5 or 6 strawweight in the world, and not know how to grapple to save your life."
Yeah,
she was going for the Ezekiel from the bottom half guard. It's not a good look when you're bailing on everything to attack something like that.
That's kind of like a desperation, stalemate.
Yeah,
more
for sure.
It's less of an attack and more of I'm just trying to hold on.
Yeah, because you're getting smashed anyway, so you're like, I might as well just do anything to seem like I'm still in this. But as the fight went on, Lemos just took over.
Yeah, and I was bringing up to you while we were watching the fight that we're seeing there's that interesting trend with jiu-jitsu black belts getting into striking, and I was talking about, man, they might not have the most perfect technique, but they have the problem-solving aspect down. And they're figuring out ways of okay, well, this is how I'm going to deal with this problem that is your striking, instead of just where we've seen before, BJJ black belts just trying to punch with a striker to go, I'm just going to distract him to get him down, where Lemos was actually going this is just another problem to solve.
Yeah, definitely she was striking extremely well for her background.
Yeah, very controlled.
I think that's something that a lot of people didn't factor in when you look at the betting odds before this fight too, is that Lemos, for as bad as Rodriguez looked on the ground, Lemos looked way improved on the feet.
Huge improvement on the feet.
And they're talking about Lemos versus Rose next.
Yeah.
I think that's a good fight.
That's a great match.
It's a great fight for someone with a similar skill set to Rose. Someone who's good on the feet, but very deadly on the ground, obviously.
And has horsepower behind it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. She has a lot of power, and I think that she just showed in this fight especially that she can make it a dogfight and tire people out extremely quickly with her striking and grappling. Because she drained Rodriguez.
Yeah, she really does stay on the gas without overcommitting, which is very rare to see. Well, if you see grapplers getting to striking, they tend to overcommit in the space wrong, where Lemos is just comfortable. It's very shocking to see that quickly of an evolution. Yeah,
for sure.
You've seen her really get better each fight in the UFC.
Yeah. That was her best fight so far. Now her record 13-2-1. It's a strong record in strawweight. Rodriguez had a great record going into this, 16-1, and now 16-2. But
still
now
a great record, yeah.
Yeah, but she's got a lot of work to do now, because now after a loss like that, it's almost like when Derek Lewis lost to Mark Hunt.
Right.
And everybody was like, "Oh, all you have to do is hit Derek in the body."
Yeah.
And everybody started hitting him in the body. He had to get way better at protecting his body. So now, now that somebody has a performance like that against you, you have to really sharpen up on those certain areas to come up in your last fight and not have the result be obvious.
Yeah.
Neil Magny became the winningest welterweight in UFC history, surpassing George St. Pierre when he submitted D-Rod in the third round.
That was a fun scrap. Yeah.
And I had just taught the Darce on Thursday, and then it showed up from the exact same position that I was talking about it from there in that fight. And, it was Rodriguez had a great first round, and then the grappling started to be a factor. Magny just kind of forced his way back into the fight, and fought very hard to get that Darce in the third.
Yeah, Dan Rodriguez, he prides himself on trying to be the bigger dog in the fight, but that is a hard way to fight Neil Magny.
So it works. Yeah. It definitely works outside the UFC.
Yes.
You can get to the UFC big dogging everyone, but then you start to get to that level where even the most athletic, elite guys can't just big dog people anymore. No, you know, Justin Gaethje did it all the way up to like number 5 in the world.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Yeah, it was wild.
He was big dogging everyone until he came across Eddie and Dustin, and they kind of changed everything for him and set him on a different path. So yeah, I think that Magny very wisely responded to that question of like, well, you know, what are your thoughts on breaking St. Pierre's record? Like, well, I would never compare myself to George St. Pierre. You know, he's such a humble fucking guy.
I like Neil Magny where he's like, man, I just fucking love to fight. Like he does. Like he doesn't ever talk about, and I think you even hear in his press conferences now, he knows he's like, shit, I may never be the world champion. Yeah. But he's definitely fighting for a living, and you see it when he fights. Like
He reminds me a lot of Paul Felder, like of this division.
Yes, because he's a working man's fighter.
Exactly. A fighter's fighter.
A fighter's fighter.
For
100%.
For sure. As far as what's next for him, probably more of the same, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like you said.
He's a great staple to have on those fight nights. Because he is some of that people, he's been around enough, people are like, shit, yeah, Neil Magny's watching, I'll watch him fight. And he brings a lot of eyes to the fight nights.
Have you heard about this Derek Minner situation?
Derek Minner? No.
Yeah, the guy who fought in the tri-main or the third fight down.
No, what happened?
Okay, so you remember the fight? He got his knee blown out by a leg kick.
Yes, like right in the very beginning of the fight. Yeah, he threw the kick and he came back on it, and he's
a James Krause fighter.
Right.
James Krause started a podcast that's about betting on MMA fights recently. And you can pay money. I think it's something like $15 a month to join his Patreon and get access to a Discord that he is in, where people are actively talking about betting fights and like, you know, betting lines moving and everything. A couple weeks ago, the UFC has to single-handedly issue a contract, like a policy-altering mandate for all in effect contracts for UFC fighters, that they and their immediate coaching staff can no longer bet on UFC fights, even if they are not fights that they are tangentially connected to.
You see that across all kind of sports. Like if you're a member of a sports team, you
real sports.
We
all know about Pete Rose and all that. But this was a very this is 2022, and UFC's been around since 1991. So it's like there's been 30 years of people betting on fights in this way and making weird shit happen. And then a week after that happens, there's this Derek Minner fight, one of Krause's guys. He goes out there, and about 5 minutes before the walkout starts, the largest betting line change in UFC history happens.
No way.
Yeah.
I did not know.
The largest money change in history of a betting line in mixed martial arts happens from Derek Minner going out in the first round due to TKO.
Interesting.
So
is there actually no injury, or?
Oh, I think there was an injury, but it's a Dillashaw situation where he was injured, knew he was injured. He's a fucking 10 and 10 guy. He's a 10 and 10 guy.
Yeah.
And they're like, they come to you and they're like, hey, look, you're going to fight in the UFC, you're going to make 10, and you might make another 10 if you win. But what we can do is we can bet X amount of money on you to lose in the first round, and you're going to make triple that, if not more.
Yeah.
And
very common still in Thailand.
So, James Krause very in some kind of hot water right now. The UFC's currently investigating the situation, and they are going to find that nobody did anything wrong, because that's what they will have to do, like from a public fighting standpoint.
I have to find the story of, and I apologize for being so ignorant, but I can never remember Thai fighters' names to save the fucking save the world.
I only know
save a child, but like there's it's very common that you'll hear coaches like, hey, you're doing too well in this fight. We need you to lose because we're going to make more money off of you losing this fight than you will for your fight purse. So
especially when they fight
we'll
foreigners,
pay you exactly. Like they'll like
because when they fight foreigners, the odds
it's not even like the
that always happens.
The foreigners so much, but this is just like in general. And you'll tell them like, hey, by the way, all the kids at the academy will eat if you lose. And like they really guilt trip these guys sometimes into like pulling the pedal back for like the last 3 rounds to lose, and they'll be like, hey, we're going to pay you more to lose now. And like that's coming from the coaches and the teammates in the corner during a fight. And that's where like you see like the Thai culture of fighting is also more heavily focused around betting than anything. And Thailand is still a third world country, but it's like heartbreaking to hear that. I'm like, man, how fucking lucky are we to live here?
Yeah, that too. And it's interesting that it happens right after this Dillashaw thing, because it's like, if it happens.
So what were the odds for the fight?
I don't have that information in front of me. It would take a while to find it, but if that fight like happens and you get injured in the fight, then the UFC also is on the hook for all your medical bills. So now the UFC has a vested interest, or could potentially in the future have a vested interest in like trying to monitor fighters more closely in camp.
Absolutely should.
Because one, they should be, for the sake of their health and safety.
I think it should be at that level in UFC. You should be having like mid-camp checkups with a doctor or like a physician. Like they have so many guys that will come out to the UFC PI to have like their injuries rehabbed, and I feel like they should have more mid-camp check-ins. Like they will go out to check in on people, like make sure they're cutting weight right, making sure they're training right, but they should have like full lookovers and x-rays and MRIs. I mean, the UFC can definitely afford to have their own room, but just like, we gonna scan you and see what's wrong, because a lot of fighters will just be like, no, I'm fine, and they're going in with a blown meniscus.
Yeah, they need a DEXA or something. Yeah, too many guys are going in there and it hurt. But yeah, I think that this is the situation where, now the Nevada State Athletic Commission is involved, like the gambling commission is involved, or like, the authority that runs gambling in Las Vegas, which is like, you'd have to think is the most legit gambling administrative body in the world, with it being Vegas, right? So I'm very, very curious to see what comes out and what extent they can get. If they can get inside of Krause's private group chats and find out that he knew beforehand, there's going to be some crazy shit coming down the line.
You can see Krause getting banned as a coach.
Dude, he'd be the Pete Rose of MMA.
Yeah.
That would be devastating.
Well, it's a bummer because he's such a good coach.
And not, he wasn't, it's not like he didn't do a shitload of stuff for the UFC while he was a fighter. He saved a lot of
fights by fighting like 55, 70,
and this was after his career was pretty much over. He was doing that for them. So, I mean, I think that the UFC will do everything in their power to protect him and protect their image.
I think they'll give him like a little, they'll like, don't do this again.
Tager Ulanbekov taking on Nate Maness in his flyweight debut, and right when the fucking cards went up and they did the tail of the tape, I said to everybody else watching the fight with us who like wasn't as informed on stuff, I'm like, you never go against a guy who has an OV last name.
No.
And sure enough, Tager put that fucking hurting on him. It was a tough one to watch. It lasted only a minute longer than the guy who came into the fight with an injury. And was trying to dive, it seems like.
That was a rough 2 minutes to watch.
Yeah, it was a rough 2 minutes to watch, and Nate didn't look good. And it's like, you're already kind of big for bantamweight. I can't imagine what you're doing yourself to make flyweight. When Buffer was announcing his name, he still looked drawn out and weird looking.
Really drawn out.
And, I just don't... I hate seeing guys cut that much weight and then fucking perform like that, because that's what you do.
Hey, it's not fucking worth it.
Yeah, that's what you do when you cut that much weight, is you perform like shit and you get finished really easily. I'm glad it was like this instead of
anyone that says like the hard part is over for the weight cut, you're kind of setting yourself up to be okay.
It is if you cut weight correctly.
Yeah, I mean, like Gonzo, there are like the do's and the don'ts of weight cutting.
Yeah,
and like Gonzo is like a bigger filled out welterweight.
Well, what I was gonna say is one thing that he was telling me about this fight versus like other fights that he had done was, he was like, dude, I felt so much different after the weight cut because I talked to Greg and he gave me a list of things it was Greg who was telling me this. He was like, Greg gave him a list of things to eat while he was rehydrating, instead of just like, because so many fighters will like make weight and be like, let's go to the steakhouse and eat some fucking ribs. Yeah. But
your first meal back should be a salad.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Greg had him on like a very regimented stuff, what you should intake before the fight. And he's like, dude, I felt so much different.
Honestly, one of the best athletes I've been around for weight cut and rehydrating has been Daniel Branch.
Oh yeah.
Very. Give me a room full of Daniel Branches as far as work ethic and mindset for weight cutting, where he knows the weight cut is a challenge, but it's also really easy to fuck it up. It's like you're doing all the weight cutting at the very end.
And not just easy to fuck the weight cut up, it's easy to fuck your whole life up if you do it wrong. Even one time, you could potentially have life-altering kidney failure consequences. I'm sure that Khabib still deals with stuff that came
Daniel
from
Cormier talks about he still has kidney issues.
Yeah.
It's what got him out of the Olympics.
Yeah. And that was before he even got to the UFC.
Yeah.
And we know about his struggles cutting weight. Grant Dawson versus Mark Madsen. Mark Madsen got fucked up. He got wrestle fucked.
Yeah, I was sitting there, I'm kind of in disbelief, and I'm like, wow, because I was speaking very highly of Mark Madsen. He very much reminds me of high-level wrestlers.
This is the hardest guy they could have given him. This is the hardest dude they could have given him, and he was a big test for him. And this guy Grant Dawson is just more overall, more well-rounded. Yeah, exactly. More in tune for MMA, more adept at switching the jiu-jitsu and the wrestling and blending the two together.
He was very privy about Mark Madsen's, and this is something I was bringing up in class last night. You hear me talk to someone like our student Joe, who wrestled for going on 14 years. Even guys like Kyle, you hear me talking don't try to shoot like a wrestler. Where Grant Dawson was I'm watching you change levels so deeply, I know exactly where you're going. And so Grant Dawson, he was getting on top of Mark Madsen, where you got to realize you can't shoot.
Well, the first thing that he did that really took Madsen out of the fight was he took his back, and instead of going to the sideways on the mat, he went up and put Madsen facing the sky. Yeah. And when you're a wrestler, that's a very foreign type of position to be in, and also it's
the last thing you want to see is the ceiling.
It's completely unathletic. There's no athleticism in that situation, right? All of your muscles are off the ground. You can't bridge, you can't bunk. All you have is your feet touching the ground, and it's not like you can just explode off of somebody's back, right?
Mark Madsen looked kind of like a baby in a car seat that fell over going, oh no!
That's exactly what he looked.
And he was helpless. I was fucking someone.
As soon as Dawson took his back and went to the sky inversion, I was talking to Cole. I was like, this guy has no idea what to do when someone's on his back. That's not a good sign if you're 13 fights deep into your MMA career and you've just been relying on your wrestling to get you there, then that's the kind of performance you see where you're like, damn, this guy is supposed to be a world beater.
This is a great showing of your biggest attribute can be your biggest setback as well.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I think is coming up on the horizon with Bo Nickel coming to the UFC. I think that's one thing we'll see from him that we haven't seen from other guys who have such a strong strength category, is that he seems to be really focusing on everything. He seems to be focusing on the striking. He seems to be focusing on the jiu-jitsu and the submissions also. He's not overly reliant like a John Fitch or a Mark Madsen.
Yeah, when you have the supercomputer that is Mike Brown as your head coach, and it's even all the data you see, because Bo Nickel has been kind of their wrestling coach there at ATT for a while. He's getting all that feedback as well. So he's really able to do it the right way. And I'm very interested to see where Bo Nickel will go. And honestly, man, with Bo Nickel, I want to say, I believe in him being the middleweight champion, but at the same time, I see him getting close. But I don't know if it'll happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just that kind of vibe I get. Hey, hopefully he proves me the fuck wrong, but I can see him definitely making his way to a title shot.
Yeah, he's definitely good enough already to get himself in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it just becomes a matter of, once he gets to the top 10, how do they match him up? Because that's how I feel. I feel like what's happening with Nickel is very similar to what's happening with Pereira, where he came to the UFC and it's we know this guy's good.
Well, he's the first Glory Kickboxing 2-division champion.
But can he?
And he has the wins over Izzy. That's gonna make you very.
We'll talk about all that shit later, but it's they'll fast track him and give him favorable matchups if he looks good in the matchups that aren't supposed to be favorable. So we'll talk about this a little bit with Pereira later, but in Pereira's first 2 outings, they gave him 2 strong grapplers. Mm-hmm. One guy held him against the fence for the whole first round, and the other guy was a black belt that never got going against him. So, I mean, if Bo goes out there against two guys that are good wrestlers and dusts both of them, they're going to start matching up with guys that don't know how to wrestle and start building him really fast.
I can see Bo Nickel versus I'm forgetting Sean Strickland by like end of next year.
Is that what Sean Strickland exists for now?
Yeah,
After
probably.
this Pereira thing?
Yeah.
Does he just exist to fucking get murked by the Rising Star now?
I mean, but that does become like
Hey,
the cross to bear for these guys.
When you're from New Bern, North Carolina, that might be your fate.
Yeah.
That might be your fate. Miranda Maverick had a great win on the prelim card.
Great win,
Looked good. Grappling was on point. Polyana Viana, 47-second knockout. That was an awesome combo. You see that?
Yes.
Shit?
Yes.
That was awesome. And that's about it for this fight night card. And it's been 2 fight nights in a row, which can only mean one thing. UFC 281 going down Madison Square Garden. For as long as the UFC has had access to it, it has been a extremely prestigious venue for them. They put on some incredible cards here.
People fight their dicks off at Madison Square Garden.
UFC 205, Conor McGregor becomes the double champion. George St. Pierre returns and 3 new champions are crowned in one night.
Yes.
There are just...
it's the anniversary of Chandler Gaethje there.
Yes,
yeah.
Chandler Gaethje happened there, of course. I mean, it is a big time venue, and this is a big time card that they've put on. All the way down to the early prelims. Julio Arce taking on Montel Jackson, Mike Trizano taking on Choi Sung-woo, Carolina Kovalevich.
I thought she retired, actually.
I thought she's retired twice by now.
Yeah.
We were talking about Ottoman Azatir.
Fucking someone to keep your eyes
bag.
on. They are giving him a great
Someone for
matchup.
USADA to keep their eyes on, too.
Yeah.
They apparently were in this man's bag for the past year and a half over the bag situation that he got into during the COVID stuff. He's back now, 13-0, and he is taking on the steamroller Matt Frivola. And you're right, this is a great matchup for him, for sure.
Yeah, Matt will come out, get in his face, and keep his head in the same spot the whole time.
Yeah,
And I think we've seen Matt Frivola, he's been the victim of, some very early knockouts because that man has negative head movement.
Yeah.
And Ottoman
somehow he moves
is
his
someone that
head on the line
of
punches.
punches.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And Ottoman, he has one of the most gut-stopping knockouts that we've seen in the UFC, where he flatlined that guy and they were just out cold before they hit the ground, head bouncing off the ground. And it was one of those where it was the entire Dana White even says he was that I did not. He was amazing knockout, but that was one of the roughest knockouts I've seen.
Yeah, that was a bad one. That was a bad one for sure. And Dana's seen some shit show knockouts.
Yeah.
Between all the stuff we've seen him see in the UFC and then all the stuff he's probably seen
growing up in Boston,
private shows too.
Yeah.
Or not private shows, but local regional shows.
Yeah, hey, I can believe that Dana White makes guys
do a private fight card,
fighting thongs in his basement or something like that. Oh, you want to fight in the UFC? Come to the basement.
That's where all the women's flyweight fights happen.
They have to fight a homeless guy. Be if you murder him, you're in the UFC, but you have to fight in this gold thong.
Andre Petrosky is taking on Wellington Turman. Petrosky is one of those guys who came into the UFC super hot, got kind of a bucket of cold water thrown at him on The Ultimate Fighter when he fought Brian Battle. Was signed anyway because they were this guy has the look that we like. White guy, beard, tattoos. Let's get him in the fucking UFC as soon as possible.
He gets our gym bro audience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's a buff Cody No Love. He's a middleweight Cody No Love, And they like him a lot, and they're giving him a matchup that I think is very winnable for him in Wellington Turman. Aaron Blanchfield taking on Molly McCann. I think the Molly McCann hot streak is over.
Yeah.
I think it is over here.
Yeah.
Aaron is
I see Aaron
problematic young woman.
Controlling the whole fight, going into a late second or early third round stoppage for Blanchfield on that.
Because McCann lost. And this is obviously before she got a lot better with her boxing. I think there has been a significant improvement from this fight to what McCann is at now. But McCann lost pretty heartily and handily to Jillian Roberts. And I feel like Aaron is just a way worse version.
Way worse, yeah.
Everything about Jillian that is threatening, Aaron is better. And it's Aaron's striking is probably not anywhere close to Molly's. but she's better at getting the grappling going than Jillian ever will be.
Her striking is definitely more geared towards making it a full MMA fight instead of dragging it out into a boxing match.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Molly's going to have her hands full, and I think that Erin has already beat women that are better than Molly, so I think this is going to be a very tough fight for her. And
But what this will do
Erin I think Erin might be 1 or 2 fights away from fighting Valentina.
Huh?
I think, but that's how it goes in women's flyweight. You know?
Yeah, it's really easy to get to the top.
They're already pumping the gas on Molly, and she's only got 2 wins.
But this sets up Molly. If she does lose this, she's easily going to be like co-headlining another UFC England card against someone that she can just knock the fuck out of.
Oh yeah.
She's a great item to have for the English market.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is just kind of like a reminder of just like, hey, this is still like the best organization in the world. And you got to eventually, like, if you put on big knockouts, we're gonna throw you to.
Yeah, it's not like she doesn't want that kind of fight either. You know, she wants to fight for the belt. She wants to fight Valentina. So
Dana White is very interesting to watch with his like training wheel protocol, where it's like, okay,
it's really
like
the matchmakers.
Yeah, the matchmakers.
More so Sean Shelby
and those guys. But like Dana White believes, and he's like, you want to take those training wheels off? Okay. Like, he's like, if you have a good showing, they're going to give you some training wheel fights to make you into a big show, to make the person that beats you the bigger draw. Mm-hmm. And they're very good at pumping it up that way.
For sure.
Yeah, and so, this is, like, if Erin puts on a statement against Molly, that puts her 1 or 2 fights away from Valentina.
Dominic Reyes returning to face Ryan Spann.
Man, they fucking hate Dominic Reyes.
They hate this motherfucker.
They fucking hate him.
They hate this motherfucker. Yeah. They put him in the Toyo Tires commercial when they thought he was going to beat John.
And then they ran him the fuck over.
They ran him the fuck over when he lost to John. Yeah, I mean, he's had a rough go of it, but we were talking about this the last time. I don't think it was when it was Reyes who fought or when it was Thiago that fought last time. We were talking about how people just aren't quite the same after they fight Jones. And
there's a long... Like, the only person to come back better from a John Jones loss is Glover Teixeira.
Yeah.
And it took Glover. Technically, like, Glover really wasn't the same after
Glover had to wait for everybody else to get hurt.
Yeah, he did. Like, Glover kind of, like, just toughed out that division to climb up on top for a bit. You know, he still had some tough runs. Like, he got knocked out by Gustafsson after the John Jones fight, I believe. But, you know, I think...
Very bad. And he famously got knocked out by Rumble in, like, 5 seconds.
Fuck, that was bad.
That was one of the coolest knockouts I've ever seen. I think that was on Conor versus Nate, too, that happened.
Yeah, you see his tooth go flying
Yeah, his tooth went fucking flying, and he fucking face planted. It was like an 8-second knockout or some crazy shit. Then he gets, like, quadruple uppercutted by Gustafsson in Stockholm, I think.
Yeah.
And then he, you know, in true jiu-jitsu fashion, waits for everyone else to, you know, get kind of beat up, get kind of tired, and then swept his way on top.
He tough man his way through that fucking division, get the chance. And, like, good for Glover. Like, it's, from all you hear about people is that Glover is just about the nicest human being, and it's funny, you see him taking on, like, this coaching role for Alex Bahia, and, man, he really gives a fuck about his students, pro and amateur. It's like, he is, like, one of the most, like, fatherly figures in, like, MMA. If I were to meet Glover, I'd be like, can I sit on your lap? Like, that's the vibe he puts off. You know, I was really happy to see him.
In Brazil, things are a little bit different when it comes to martial arts culture. It's more like Japan, where it's like, if you're involved with this in any capacity and you want to be good at it, you eventually see yourself at the end of the line with a black belt on, with your own school, teaching people your art. And, you know, it's not like it here is in the U.S. I think that a lot of people in the U.S. that train, even people who train outside of MMA and train karate or taekwondo, they get the black belt and that's their goal. Like, I'm going to be a black belt and then I'm going to go back to being Kevin from IT.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I don't really necessarily need to have my own academy, but in Brazil, that's what everybody does. Everybody's like, I'm starting a fucking school. And Glover lives in Atlanta, right?
No, he's in Connecticut.
Connecticut, that's right.
Danbury, Connecticut.
I'm thinking of Lima.
He moved up there specifically for the boxing coach that he has. Like, the boxing coach, I forgot his name, but he's a legend in, like, fighting. And, like, he actually came up through Brazil and he moved to America. And Glover Teixeira moved to Connecticut, wasn't even training with him yet, just moved near the guy and just looked for him on a daily basis around his jogging route. And one day just went, hey, can you train me? And the guy was like, what the fuck, man? Okay. And that was it. And now they have a school together. And it's a great thing.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I think that the big problem for Dominic Reyes in this fight is that Ryan Spann is just as athletic as he is. That's a big fucking deal. That's a big problem.
And he's longer. He is where Dominic Reyes is so great at fighting, and this is a thing that I've noticed training football players at crossover. Like a big football player, they are great at moving backwards for big guys, and that's where Dominic Reyes always excelled. Like on the straight line, he moves forward on a straight line, but backwards he cuts off and recuts, and span is so long. He's going to be putting those long jabs and crosses out. Step back, he's probably going to step back through with a step through jab and probably knock out Reyes with a jab. Like, I swear to Christ, it'll probably happen. Like, Span is very good about being in and out with his arms. Like, he puts people on train tracks, and then he'll cut back and then step back through. And he's going to go gadget his jab through Reyes' face. I think we're going to see Reyes get absolutely flatlined again. He's going to look good on the outside for a second, then Span will go, sorry, I have an 18-foot wingspan.
Yeah, and that could be a very problematic night for Dominic Reyes. I think Reyes is going to need to bust out some of the old tools. He's going to need a strong inside leg kick, and he's got a great left body kick.
But Span, like, the downside of him being so long, like, he doesn't give a fuck. Like, right. Reyes' best tools are not going to play well against someone like Span, and it's you see it happen in high-level boxing where the highest level fighters just end up losing to the jab and the cross, just executed perfectly to break down their movement and patterns. And if Reyes tries to measure with an inside low kick or a body kick, that's exactly where Span wants him at.
Then headlining the prelims, we got Brad Riddell versus Renato Moicano. I think Moicano looking a lot better at lightweight.
So much better at lightweight. Yeah. Still has the same issue of Frivola, where it's like he does not have the best
That was a big problem in the zombie fight. When he fought Crazy Zombie,
big problem.
Couldn't get out of the way.
And he is fighting a high-level Muay Thai fighter in Brad Riddell.
Yeah.
Brad Riddell,
underrated. Too.
Very underrated. You know, he had a rough showing against Fiziev.
He's one of those guys that, like, outside the UFC, everybody was like, dude, when this guy gets to the UFC, people are in trouble.
He was making a big splash in one
UFC. He got to the UFC, and then he experienced why the UFC is the #1 organization in the world, and now I think people are thinking about him as just another guy.
He was Fiziev's striking coach for a while, and that's like what pissed off Riddell. He was like, okay, I guess we have to do this, but like
he is not just another guy.
No, he is not just another guy.
And this is a strong, like you said, strong Muay Thai fighter.
Strong Muay Thai fighter, and this is definitely a fight that will keep Brad Riddell very relevant for a long while.
Moicano's a big name.
Moicano is a big name.
Big name. At 45, his resume is lengthy. So when
he looked great in his lightweight debut.
He looked great in lightweight.
You know, like this still makes it interesting. Of like if Moicano wants to bang, it's not going to be a good time. If Moicano wants to make it into an MMA fight, I think Moicano will pull out.
That's a much better opportunity for him. Even if he doesn't necessarily have to take the fight to the ground if he's threatening the takedowns constantly.
Yeah. Remember, kids, sometimes going for the knockout isn't worth it if you're not a knockout artist. Like, you know, and it's one thing to be a knockout artist in MMA and then try to act that way against a high-level striker. You have a bad time.
Especially against a Muay Thai practitioner like Brad Riddell, who's seen it all and done it all by now. That is a potential fight of the night right there.
100%.
By the way, that is two guys who always get into scraps. And the biggest problem in that fight is going to be Moicano's chin. He doesn't have at least at 45. Well, I mean, he hasn't really.
He was looking a little bit. Well, who did he fight at lightweight for his lightweight debut? I know he looks a bit more durable.
Let's see here.
But he will not. I think he'll be able to take like a shot or two from Riddell. But once again, if Riddell... Hernandez.
But he lost to Dos Anjos after that.
That's right, yeah.
But that was a 5-round fight in which he looked... That was that short notice fight where he came in and got beat up pretty bad by Dos Anjos. And Dos Anjos probably could have finished him, but took the foot off the gas.
Moicano's a hard time dealing with volume hitting him.
Hernandez is no joke, and he handled Hernandez. Yeah. That was all the way back in February of last year, though. So... I'm hoping that his chin holds up and we get an entertaining fight out of that one because I think that one's got fight of the night written all over it, save for one other fight on the main card. And we'll get into the main card right now. All right, UFC 281 main card getting started with Claudio Puelles versus Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker needs a win bad, which is crazy. Considering like 2 years ago, we were talking about this guy as if he was a potential future champion.
Yes.
And now he is in a situation where he might need to win one or get sent to the fucking PFL shadow realm.
He is back at lightweight. Smart move.
Again,
should not have gone to featherweight.
The ups and downs of this guy's career is too much to bear for me almost.
Yeah, it's tough to watch. Like, and he's a very likable guy, but he's one of those like he is the like the live by the sword kind of guy. Like you can't always be that way in MMA because there's just so many ways to get fucked up, and you cannot have that mentality of like. I'm gonna go into this battle and bring me back on top of my shield. Well, okay, you're fucking dead technically. Like, don't do that. And even like my student Hunter Perez had to talk to my other student Vic Ma about that, where it's like, shut the fuck up about that Spartan shit, bro. Like, come back with your sword and your shield in your hand. Like, don't go out there and then like, you can go into a fight with your sword and your shield, meaning like you can have your jab and you can have your chin. Don't go into your next fight without your shield there, you know, like a lot of guys will have that shield to damage going to the next fight, and that was like always Dan Hooker's moniker. Like, kids, that shit runs the fuck out. No matter how many therapists you talk to, no matter how many times you talk to yourself in the mirror,
no matter how much alpha brain you take,
no matter how much alpha brain you take, no matter how much like raw beef liver you fucking eat for breakfast, that shit just wears out. Like, you have to focus on fighting as a long-term career. Like, it looks cool to be blood and guts, but man, if your brain is checked out and your chin is checked out, then it's gone. Like, there's no real coming back. And guys like that, and it's not just the physical wear and tear, it's the mental wear and tear, because your body just goes like, dude, we can't be in the situation anymore, we gotta go. And it just checks itself out. And Hooker's kind of stuck in that point, where it's interesting to see if he can go in and fight in a fight to win, not just be in a fight to fight.
Yeah, that's been a big problem for him, is he's been in a fight to fight a lot. Mm-hmm. And outside the UFC, that always worked out for him, you know. But he was a guy who came into the UFC and said yes to everyone, and any fight, any weight, any time, and you just can't fight like that if you want to be a world champion.
No.
You just can't fight like that. And the guy he's taking on is a fresh spring chicken to the UFC. 26 years old, grappling specialist. He beat Clay Guida in his UFC debut.
Like that rolling knee bar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah.
So, I mean, that's a silver lining here, is that maybe, you know, he won't get knocked out.
Yeah, maybe Hooker, like, I'd love to see Hooker just get behind his jab and keep Claudio on the outside and make Claudio, like, frustrated and have some bad shots.
He has to fight like all of his teammates.
Yes.
That's always been Hooker's biggest problem, is that like he has access to the same tools and the same coaches that all of his teammates do, yet he doesn't fight like any of them. He doesn't feint. He doesn't hide behind his jab very well or come out behind it very well. He doesn't circle or cage cut very well like Israel does or any of the others. Yeah. You know, I mean,
like he has that style of that. He got too comfortable, like in his younger fights, to just go onto the ropes to make people come in and swarm at him because he wanted to outdog them, and you just can't do that on the cage wall.
Yeah. Speaking of dogs, Frankie Edgar, possibly the last time we see him.
It is the last time. He's already declared
he
confirmed it. He said that he's a parent. He wants to be at the park with his kids.
I'm gonna say
Ryan Kim Cafaro, who's like one of his longtime training partners, strike coach, is like, yeah, this is the last ride for the general, and man, he about to get fucked up by Gutierrez.
Yeah, Chris Gutierrez is no fucking joke, huh?
No, not at all, man. Amazing switch hitter. He's a product of the Factory X Muay Thai team, and he has that thing that is Frankie Edgar's big weakness, and that is age, athleticism, speed, and power. The things that like just Frankie Edgar doesn't have anymore, Gutierrez still has. And the dude's a whole ass Mexican.
Yeah.
Like Frankie Edgar could. I could see Gutierrez getting rocked by Edgar, but Gutierrez will also know, like, okay, that's the only good shot that Edgar had in him. I don't think Edgar has enough.
I wish that more often they did the whole retirement fight kind of thing as if it wasn't just another UFC fight.
Right.
Because if this was just another UFC fight, making a fight between Frankie Edgar and Chris Gutierrez makes sense, but when Faber said that he wanted to retire, they gave him Brad Pickett You know, they gave him somebody that was very beatable and on the same level as him, and in the same place in his career as him.
But man, when he came back,
they were like, "Well, fuck you. You can have Ricky Simone."
Yeah, and then he finished him, and then he's like, "All right, well, here's Peter Yan," and then he was kind of like, "Maybe I'll just hang out and still run this gym."
Yeah, I think my kids are calling me. I'll be back later. You know,
like, hey, I think I forgot my kid's name. What are we doing here?
But Frankie, obviously, his resume speaks for itself. Incredible resume. 3 incredible fights against Gray.
And BJ Penn.
Multiple title runs.
Yeah, he has 2 trilogy really fights with him. Yeah.
And two almost became a champion in 2 weight classes.
Yes.
Was almost one of the first guys to do that. Has got the who's who of MMA, like Hall of Famers, Rushmore.
It's so wild to see Frankie Edgar fighting at bantamweight, and motherfuckers are still bigger than him. Like, it really goes to show you the evolution of, like, people just get bigger as the sport goes on.
It's crazy that he was champion at 55, right?
Yeah.
So crazy. But yeah, I'm hoping that we see a little bit of vintage Frankie Edgar before Chris Gutierrez finishes him.
There you go. Yeah, and like we're gonna see some vintage Frankie in the first round, but I think it'll be over in the first round or the second. Like, Frankie just does not hold up getting hit well anymore, and it's tough to say that, but it
is what it is. Yeah, that's correct, buddy. That is correct, and yeah, I think that we're both in agreement on this one. So let's talk about.
What's tough is, man, Gutierrez is someone that I feel like the UFC as a whole is going to have a hard time trying to promote. He's not.
Well, that's why they're giving him Edgar.
Yeah, because it's the only way to make him like a more marketable fighter.
They feel that way too.
Yeah, they do. They're like, yeah, you're not the guy that people are going to tune in and fight. Like, fight fans or like people that enjoy educated striking love seeing Gutierrez fight, but he's like, I just like to fight. I like to read books. Like, he's a very normal kind of guy that just loves to fight.
He's like Cater in that way.
Yeah.
And Cater was like that until he fought Max Holloway, then he became a draw.
Yes.
Even though he got his ass beat. Like, you know, that's a good example of somebody's stock going up in defeat. But the big three, and buddy, let me tell you, these big 3, I'd take this big 3 over the big 3 from UFC 280 any day of the week. This is so much better.
Yeah.
Might be the best card of the year for sure. Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. It's been talked about to goddamn death, and it's finally here. They fucking got into it in the crowd. They've got into it on social media, and now they're finally gonna fucking fight. 2 guys who have consistently put on fight of the night, fight of the year contenders.
As long as they've been fighting.
Are going to go at it.
Yeah.
And it is one of those fights where, much like the Chandler-Gaethje fight, it gives me the most anxiety and the most like excitement of any fight, even though it has the lowest stakes of the 3 fights.
Yeah.
But even, the stakes are high. The winner's probably going to fight Beneil or fight the winner of Islam and Volk. Best case scenario, but you're probably fighting Beneil.
Yeah.
But I think I'm a little torn on this one. I don't know where I feel. I don't know where my brain lies. I just want to see the fight, you know.
Yeah,
I'm a bigger fan of the fight than I am either guy, and I'm a huge fan of both these guys.
I'm a huge fan of both these guys. I am, and yeah, people are like, "Who do you think's gonna win?" And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like,
I could not give a fuck.
Me personally, do I think Dustin has better chances of beating Michael Chandler? Yes. However, I selfishly would like to see Chandler win because it's still way more of a, this guy hasn't fought all the same top guys.
It'll be funnier if Chandler wins.
It'll be funnier.
Yeah, and it would be more chaotic.
Exactly. Like, Chandler winning this fight really tosses up the division more than, like, because, like, Poirier is still like, well, I'm still everything but the champion. And Michael Chandler is still the guy that you can draw out, like, Michael Chandler and Beneil could easily co-headline a pay-per-view together.
And he's still the other guy that people feel that way about.
He's the other guy.
Where people are like, he's everything but the champion. You know, he's won the belt in another org. He came this close to beating Charles.
Yeah. And I personally think that if he rematches Charles, he would probably beat Charles, you know? And that's what makes it more interesting, you know? And then the same thing of, like, Islam. Like, we all know that if Poirier fights Islam, he's going to get Khabib. But what about Chandler? Will he get Khabib? We don't know yet. Yeah, like, I love Poirier's backstory. I love Michael Chandler. I personally think that Poirier has more tools and ability to win. But goddamn, don't let Michael Chandler hit you.
Do you think, as a striking coach, do you think Chandler's boxing is the best? Or sorry, not Chandler. Poirier's boxing is the best in the UFC?
It depends on what type of boxer you are. And Michael Chandler and Poirier are two different types of boxers. Poirier is a southpaw and fights very well as a southpaw. He fights in and out of the pocket, and he fights for volume. Where Michael Chandler is almost like a white Mike Tyson, and still does a good job of T-stepping offline, where he won't fight you with volume, he fights you with power.
Isn't his nickname Iron Mike also?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Literally,
and
like
because literally like Mike Tyson. And this is interesting. Like, except 7 inches shorter. Actually, who knows? They're probably around the same height. Like, goddamn. They are like. So I'll say this: in their respective areas of boxing, they're both very good. And like people forget, there's more than one way of boxing. There's multiple ways of boxing at all weight classes. These two have really shown that they're the best. Michael Chandler is the best explosive boxer for little guys. Dustin Poirier is the most well-rounded, educated boxer. Mm-hmm. And sometimes being that educated gets you caught. Like we're going to see how Poirier can corral with his lead hook. We're going to see if Chandler can explode into his left hook.
Yeah.
This is going to be a battle of right hook, left hook.
You ever seen the movie Troy?
With Brad Pitt, and he does.
You know the signature move that Brad Pitt has, where he kind of like jumps up in the air with the spear and does a stab. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel about Mike Chandler's step in left hook.
Yes,
he's like fucking.
Let's go.
Yeah, he's like flying. He's practically flying.
He is, and you know, with Poirier being so calm and measured on the outside, that's where you get caught by guys like Chandler because that motherfucker literally shifts around the whole cage with that left hook. And the way that Poirier tends to get above his jab and his lead hook makes me worried.
Chandler's got better kicks also.
Heavier kicks. Way heavier kicks. Poirier has way better calf kicks to help make his boxing longer.
And I think
he also has more tools on the inside behind his hands. Like he knows how to fight inside with elbows and knees. Where Chandler's like, yeah, bitch, hit me with that. I'm going to hit you right back.
I was about to mention the fact that I think that the calf kick could show up in this fight for Poirier super big. Because Chandler's shown some vulnerability to that technique before.
And that's that downside of him.
Of stepping so heavily forward, too.
Well, when you talk to Michael Chandler, he even says, he's like, I got no legs, Paul. Like, he sits on a chair like this, and his feet are still kicking up in the air, you know? Have you seen the guy? He has the upper body of a 6'8" Greek Adonis, but then he's got the legs of, like, Deadpool when he's been ripped in half by the Juggernaut, you know? The little baby legs. And carrying around all that ass, it keeps him very planted. Michael Chandler has probably the worst kick defense I've ever seen. And that is going to play dividends. However,
it's like Nate on steroids. Yeah. Like, imagine if Nate wasn't just standing there, but was actively like leaning forward and flying at you.
And you know, however, this also goes into like Michael Chandler knows that Poirier is going to kick him.
But
if Poirier goes for that outside calf kick, if Chandler decides to go ahead and stand with his foot at 11 instead of like 12 or sometimes 1, if he keeps it at 11. Then he has nothing. Then like Poirier's got nothing but shin to meet and that left hook to answer behind that calf kick. If Poirier tries to go to the inside of the calf on Chandler, guess what you still have to worry about? Chandler's motherfucking left hook. Like it's such a big like.
You really got to hit him on the outside.
Yeah. Sure. You talk about like this is like watching just two medieval knights try to joust each other.
You're gonna be hard pressed for Riddell and Moicano to get fighted.
I'm gonna be telling everyone that's watching this movie just shut the fuck up.
Like Chandler's always been must see TV, right? Even before he got to the UFC, the only reason you wouldn't watch one of his fights is because he's fighting one of the Pitbull brothers for the 8th time. Like I really don't want to fucking see this again. You know, like. I don't even care if they knock, because it always ended like with him
getting knocked out or them getting knocked out. And I think like even the Pitbull brothers were like,
honesty Michael Chandler has had. That's why it would be funnier for him to be UFC champion, because then the Pitbull brothers would be like, we beat this guy twice.
Like, let us in the UFC now.
But I think that is...
I'd love to see Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler in a tag team match, like a Russian tag team match in a cage against the Pitbull brothers.
After they after they fight, I hope they can put this fucking, the silliness behind them and do a podcast together or something. Like, they just seem like the two guys in the UFC that are, like, the most beloved by the fans, especially for this division. I think people are not going to be disappointed in this fight unless it ends
it's
an
also,
injury.
I believe that a lot of this comes from Poirier being threatened for his spot. This is the fucking guy to really dethrone Poirier and make him take some time off.
And bro, when that happens to you in this division,
if Poirier gets knocked out by Chandler, he's gonna need some time off. And when he comes back,
fight number 8,
he's not gonna have anywhere to be in that division. You know,
he's gonna be fighting the number 9 guy.
Because this could also be that thing where this could be Michael Chandler's last big win.
Well, we were talking about that with Beneil when Beneil fought. We were like, dude, if Beneil loses this fucking fight, he is getting set back so many years in his career because this is lightweight, baby. This is the most competitive division in the world. And it is only because Chandler is Chandler that he was able to lose the fights that he lost, the championship, the real important fights, basically. And
well, he has a very, like, Gaethje-esque
appeal.
Yes, in the UFC, where it's like he has that potential to be UFC interim champion, but probably not champion. Ooh, I could see Chandler and Beneil going for the interim title.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be talked about. The winner of this is going to probably fight Beneil for an interim belt.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And Poirier's already been interim champion. He's been everything but the undisputed champion, of course.
Now he's the hot sauce king.
Now he's the fucking hot sauce king of the UFC, baby. And that's a big come up for him. Coming event, Carla Esparaza versus Zhang Weili.
So I feel pretty confident what I'm about to say.
I do too.
I think the Cookie Monster about to be crushed up.
I think that Zhang Weili is going to do whatever the fuck she wants to Carla. And I think Carla's going to be very hard pressed to come up with any possible solution to what Zhang Weili is
Zhang, she's gonna fucking bring that fight the whole time. She's gonna be in front of her. Carla may get a takedown in the first round, but that'll be it. Yeah. I don't see her having the ability to hold Weili down. I don't see Carla, Carla has the most, it's not even underrated striking, it's just very not good striking.
It's just very not good striking for him.
Yeah, and I hate to say that because I know Carla Esparza could probably beat the shit out of me. Like, I've met her, she's a very sweet person, but she was almost kind of, for her to have the title right now, it was the most bizarre occurrence of someone getting a title again, She was able to, and we already saw, before the quarantine, she was getting outclassed by girls in the top 10. However, the quarantine played in a big favor of her not fighting in front of audiences. She fucking crumbles under the crowd.
She also fought Mariana Rodriguez, which after this weekend, that win has kind of aged poorly. Because now we know, well, damn, Carla, you're supposed to be a world-class grappler. You could have just fucking finished her. You didn't have to have a close fight with her.
She is good enough to be in the top 10, but she kind of managed to find her way back to that title shot. And it's this is going to show, hey, Carla, your time is done. And I hate saying that, but Zhang Weili is fucking terrifying, bro. She's a wrecking machine everywhere. And
did you see that video of her picking up Francis?
Yeah,
it was nothing.
Yeah.
Francis is like, no, wait till after fight. You don't want to get injured. And she's just like, fuck you, Francis.
And you see Frank, he was like, you weren't supposed to pick me up that easy.
He's like,
wait, what?
But
no, Zhang Weili.
There's probably heavyweights on the roster that can't pick up
Francis.
Such ease.
Yeah. And Zhang Weili, she having her time with Henry Cejudo. She became
a game changer.
She became an absolute sponge.
Yeah.
But what Henry taught her for American wrestling, in the second Rose fight? Yeah, so the first Rose fight I remember she tried to act like Saenchai too much and she played with her lead leg too much and Rose went, bitch, I'm gonna kick you, okay, you're pulling back, pull back, boom, head kick. And then we saw in the rematch where her wrestling looked like she was a world-class wrestler against Rose, but she didn't have the conditioning and years in to keep that up.
The first 2 rounds. But
exactly.
But the Joanna fight was really where we saw the wrestling.
Yes. And not just that, but the wrestling being applied everywhere in all aspects of that fight.
Yeah.
Of where her wrestling looked like, oh shit, she has done, Chinese sandog grappling, which is very judo and foot sweep based grappling.
But she's also been to Thailand.
She's also been
She's also been to training with the best American wrestler.
Yeah, and she's a through and through martial artist, and she understands fighting for what it is, and having that supercomputer that is Henry Cejudo work with her wrestling, that changed her into what is going to be, like, she's about to have her second reign of championshipness, and she's about to fuck up everybody for a long, long time, I believe.
I agree, 100%. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the main event of the evening.
Alex, going to say it now.
Pereira versus Israel Adesanya.
Bruce Buffer pulls out a gun and shoots them both.
It's an overtime.
Yeah, it's an overtime.
I would say that this is a little early, but what else can you do with Israel?
What else can you do with the middleweight division?
What else do you do with Pereira after you gave him Strickland? I mean, it's clear that when the UFC signed Pereira, this is what they had in mind.
Absolutely.
And it couldn't have worked out better for them if they tried. I think that they tested him with the first two guys. Like I said earlier in the show, I think they gave him a nice little test. Mm-hmm. Two guys that were not UFC caliber guys, but were grapplers. And he aced those tests. I mean, when he first fought the guy who held him against the fence, I was like, oh boy. I was getting kind of Blood Diamond vibes, where I was like, oh, okay, well, he's good at striking, but like he can't get off the wall to save his life.
Yeah.
And then he just fucking flying knees the guy in the second round. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. That's what you need to do. But Strickland, that fight was just awful. It was just awful. Tailor-made for Pereira's style.
It was almost comical to see Pereira's face. He was like, really? This is what you're bringing to me? Mm-hmm. And then it was left hook, step in, cross. And
I rewatched both of those Izzy and Pereira kickboxing fights.
Yeah.
And I think that...
Like, even in those fights, Izzy was still the better kickboxer.
I think he won both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you don't win a fight you get knocked out in, but he was definitely winning the fight.
And Izzy is even the cool thing about it. He says... Man, the dude fucking caught me. And he says, like, I've never taken anything away from him, but Izzy is still the better kickboxer. But I'll say this. Goddamn, have you seen Alex Pereira hit pads with his striking coach, that big dude, that big 400-pound motherfucker, and his hooks and kicks are lifting him off the ground? Like, his power and his striking is such a fucking X factor in this fight, and that's what makes it interesting. Mm-hmm. You know, Pereira has been hinting at, like, he got the Glory middleweight and light heavyweight titles. And then we saw, and he even talked about, he's like, if Izzy wins the UFC title, I will go to the UFC and knock him out again. And so Pereira has been training to get ready to get back into MMA since he was in Glory kickboxing. And I think that a lot, and even me, I'm like, man, we're going to see purple belt Adesanya come out in this fight. But good luck wanting to try and grab a hold of Pereira.
I honestly don't understand the idea that Israel's not a better striker than he is. I think
he is 100% a better striker. He's a better all-around MMA fighter. He is. I think that...
Because one thing I think that I noticed that I thought you would really like, because you talk about it all the time, is the thing that really fucked over Alex in their kickboxing fights and that he could not get around. And even when he knocked him out, it's not like he was knocking him out because he adjusted their strategy. But Israel fights orthodox, but all of his strongest and best shots come from southpaw. Mm-hmm. So he constantly is coming in, and then he hits that little switch, and as soon as he switches, he fires and goes right back to orthodox. Mm-hmm. And you don't even have a second to adjust to the southpaw.
He never gives you like a clear line to hit. And when Pereira threw that left hook, it was the most Hail Mary left hook you could ever see at the highest level.
But Gastelum hit Israel with one of those.
Yes.
And if it was not Gastelum, if it was this guy, Israel would be in
the
hospital.
What Pereira brings to this is a different level of I don't give a fuck.
But, another thing that...
We've literally never seen a more accomplished striker than Pereira come into the UFC, except maybe
Israel.
Except maybe Gokhan Saki.
Yeah, and Gokhan.
And he still had a rough fucking time after 2 fights. He was like, fuck this shit.
Gokhan was also in a much worse place in his life, in his career.
Yes, very true.
He was coming to the UFC because nothing else was going for him.
Yeah.
Pereira could have easily had another 5-10 years as a money making. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's not a shitload of money to be made there, but money making.
When you're making American money and you're living in Brazil, you're making a pretty good.
You're living like a king, right? But that's one thing that goes into this fight is like an X factor. Is like, this is Israel's home office. Mm-hmm. This is the biggest fight of Pereira's life, and it's not even close. Yeah. It's like, as accomplished as he is, and for the things that he's seen and he's done, he has never been in Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
And especially not main event Madison Square Garden against the number one guy in the world. I have to think that weighs heavily on the mind. You know, that can. Some guys are immune to that.
I kind of think that Pereira is one of those guys that us Americans forget
we just can't understand.
Out there. We can't understand. Yeah. He's literally a jungle person from Brazil who's been doing manual labor since he was 10. Like, he's not like quite a Francis Ngannou story, but he's the descendant of tribal people. Like, he grew up having to like hunt down jaguars in the jungle.
Unfortunately for him, his story is just a little too similar to too many people from Brazil.
Yes, yeah, but
I
also
remember reading about him, his uncles and his father being tiguereros. You know about that?
Yeah, the jaguar
big cat hunters. Yeah, with the spears. Yeah.
And that's a different type of person, but thinking like this is also still is the fight against someone who is part Matrix.
Incredible book, by the way. There's a book called The Tiguerero, and it's about a white guy who joins up with a group of the Brazilian Tiguerero jaguar hunters.
Oh, that's fucking sick.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's very hard to find actually. I think it's like $60 on Amazon for like a paperback.
Is that the one that you have to fight? You have to fight the guy with the rusty knife out back of Barnes and Noble?
I don't know. No, I'm just saying that if you go to like a used book site where you normally can get any book for like $2, you're probably not gonna find it on there. I don't know if there's just not a lot of copies of it out there. Maybe there's an audio book, but I read it like 7 years ago when I first got into MMA.
Dope.
Because Pat Miletich recommended it, and he was like, "This is a really good book," and I was like, "What is this book about?" And it's about a guy who goes to Brazil, and this is like in the I think it's like in the 1930s or 1940s that he goes to Brazil. Sick. And they're in the thick of hunting those jaguars with the spears, and he like learns how to do it from them. You know, it's a fucking sick book. But yeah, I heard about his family doing that. I've seen him doing the traditional archery and archery. As someone who's done a lot of it, that's a martial art.
Pereira's downside will be if he tries to treat it just like a kickboxing match. And I think like Pereira's like the biggest setback he'll have is trying to make this into well. There's two sides of that. There could be an advantage to drawing Izzy into that kickboxing match, but I think Izzy's too fucking smart for that in this fight.
I also think that, like, I mean, here's how I see the fight going down.
I also, by the way, kind of hate picking who wins in an MMA fight. If people ask me, like, who's going to win this fight, and I'm like, here's my thoughts on both. Like, I don't fucking know. I
find it much more interesting.
I have a better idea of who's going to win once the fight starts.
I have a much more interesting time for myself, and I think our listeners do too, from what I've heard from people that listen to the show. I like to speculate on what the guys will do, not necessarily who's going to win.
Yes.
I like to speculate on what I think the strategy will be.
I like seeing the fight unfold
if
for what it is.
comes out, because we were you and I, and Trevor Loken were pretty spot on in our summation of the Jan O'Malley fight beforehand, like how it would shake out. And we were talking about how Sean would look a lot better than most people are going to give him credit for. I mean, we called a lot of stuff, and I think that for me, not being as educated and striking as you, but having seen all of Pereira's previous fights, I think he makes a big effort in the first round to knock Israel out.
Yes.
And then if that doesn't work out, he steps back a little bit and starts going into kickboxing mode. And then as we get into that fourth and fifth, and late in the fourth and the fifth, he starts looking for the left hook knockout. Because we know that if Israel does have a downside, it's that he is untouchable. He's a ghost in the first 2 rounds. And then after there's been a little bit of action, after there's been a little bit of time, he becomes a little bit more hittable in the fourth and the fifth especially.
I'm very curious to see how Pereira will approach the first round, because he will not give a fuck about Izzy's feint game.
Exactly. I think he'll try to charge right through it.
He is. Yeah. And Izzy enjoys getting comfortable behind his feints to find range, but Izzy's also still a high enough striker to go ahead and say, he knows behind his feint, like, he's such a goddamn computer, he's going to find he won't find the immediate attack off that feint. He's very good about, and great feinting is showing one thing and attacking with the other. And I think that can still play into Izzy's favor. It can also still play into him getting touched with that left hook again.
See, Izzy is so good at feinting from that perspective that you just described, that he can
feint. He's great against other people that are not Alex Pereira.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
so many guys in like MMA it's like seeing the guy who's a good MMA striker
look at what
spar a kickboxer for the first time. Like, what the fuck is happening?
I mean, look what Volkanovski was able to do with feints, and he's not a lifelong kickboxer who has been doing them forever. He just
trains under an educated. He also trains under Eugene Behrman, all those guys, and he picked up. He's like, oh, feints are really fucking important if people know that you hit hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like Israel can feint a jab and hit you with a low kick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he can kind of train you so well with that feint that he can feint a jab and then jab you.
Yes.
Like he can just he can make you be thinking about so many different things. It really makes
you it gets you very disheartened when that happens.
And I think that Israel is, especially in his championship era, he's been a slow starter. But it's not like he's so much of a slow starter that if you try to come out of the gate on him really quickly, that it's going to like overwhelm him like it would like Robbie Lawler.
Yeah.
Like Robbie Lawler was kind of a slow starter.
He's a master of a 5-round fight.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's definitely figured out how to fight in a way that is very complementary to MMA judging as well.
Yes.
Like he is very good at inflicting significant damage while taking minimal damage and making it look like he's winning every exchange, even when he's being like pressed backwards or when he's being like kind of semi-controlled. He gets up, he has one like quick pop combination and he backs off. He's very good at just kind of like we said in the last episode, we were talking about judging, like if you're the last person to hit in an exchange, it more often looks like you win that exchange, even if you've taken more damage.
Yep.
And I think Israel's always good at getting the last word in and the first word in. He usually starts with a feint, and then he waits for a reaction and then tries to hit you. And that's usually how most exchanges against him go.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people just kind of stand in front of him and they get hit a couple times, they get frustrated, so they stop hitting as much. Whereas I think Pereira's the guy who, one, isn't going to give a fuck about the feints at all. He's not going to be biting like everybody else is. But also, if it does start happening that Israel starts touching him, it's not like he's going to melt and get frustrated and stop hitting. He's going to keep coming forward.
The only way I see Pereira melting is if Izzy turns this into an up and down fight. And what I mean by that, it's kind of like going to the pool with your big brother, and they're like, oh, here's your swim lesson, bitch. And they put your head like underwater long enough to make you freak out, then bring you back up enough to feel safe, and then put your head back underwater.
I remember we watched Stipe and Francis fight the second time again. I was like, or no, it was Francis and Gagne West. Yeah. I remember when they fought, I was like, yeah, I mean, the only way Francis wins is if he grapples, so I guess I'd like to see that.
But this Izzy, I think, is going to be smart enough to be able to turn it into getting a body lock, getting a trip. And as soon as like Pereira's like, I'm defending, wait, why are you standing the fuck back up?
Right.
And the only way to really take Pereira out of his game is to turn it not so much into the left and right fight, but the up and down fight. Pereira is very comfortable on the wall, we've seen. How does he feel naked on the ground? You know?
Yeah.
And it's a huge disheartening cadence shift for strikers to be taken down and then just get back up. There's a difference of a striker being taken down, sweeping to get back up.
Yeah.
It's really intelligent for a good person with MMA grappling to go for that trip, take them down, then get back up on the feet, reset the fight at a different pace, and turn it into a different fight with the up-down. And like I said, I think Izzy's best bet is to put his head underwater, make him feel like he's drowning, then, okay, I'm breathing, I'm getting comfortable. And then he'll turn into a striking exchange, and as soon as Pereira gets defensive, he just makes it MMA grappling 101, body lock, trip, back down, touch. Okay, he's defending really heavy into this frame, I'm going to let him back up. Grapplers do not know how to let go of that physical push and frame retention. Like, it shows up on the feet. And that can make Pereira a big target the later the fight goes on. But what makes it still interesting, what if he touches Izzy? There's just that goddamn power. Like, and Pereira has shown, like, this is probably his first 30-minute fight. You know, he's had 5-round kickboxing matches that are 3 minutes. And that whole extra 10 minutes added on is a motherfucker, you know?
Yeah.
So we can see Pereira being okay with the up and down of it going into the third round, but the fourth and fifth will be interesting. And what makes it even more interesting is, what if he still touches Izzy? What if we see an Usman Roberts, or Edwards, excuse me, all over? Like, and my thing is like, after the Usman Edwards fight, I'm like, shit, it could totally happen in this fight. We could see Izzy take control of the whole fight, up and down, left and right, and still get clipped with 10 seconds left.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this fight so fucking interesting.
I think that one thing that
I'd be so mad if Izzy just knocks him out in the first round. I'm like, god damn it, Izzy. Like, it'll be like people like calling up like Mike Tyson, like, I want a refund. Mike Tyson knocked this guy out in 10 seconds. Like, I don't see that. I don't see that happening. But like, if Izzy goes out and chokes him the fuck out in the first round, I think, good for you, Izzy. Like,
I think no matter what, I think no matter what happens in the actual fight, I think Israel doesn't walk out of this one with more fans. I think it's kind of hard for him to beat Alex in a way that people are going to be satisfied with in terms of their criticisms of him as a champion.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that he should just,
the only way that he'll get more fans is if he gets hurt bad, then comes back and wins.
That's the only way.
It's the only way.
If it looks easy for him, people hate him even more.
Yeah, sure. You know what? I have a good feeling about Izzy winning if he just walks out and fights Izzy. Like, no showmanship beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to see how like.
You don't think we're getting a crazy walkout?
No.
Oh, I think we're getting a crazy.
You think you're getting a crazy? Man, if we get a crazy walkout, then I can probably see.
Then you're like Pereira wins.
Yeah. But if Izzy's just focused on walking out and fighting this fucking guy,
if Pereira did a crazy walkout. But,
watch Pereira walk out with a fucking live jaguar.
He's literally.
Oh my god! If the cameras have been, there's a live jaguar loose. What
Dana's
the fuck?
I didn't clear this.
I didn't clear this. Who let a jaguar in the building? And then Trump's in the Batcave like
Israel.
Like
I have diplomatic immunity.
Your laws do not apply to me. Yeah, they fucking do. You can't bring a jaguar to Madison Square Garden.
And then Israel walks out wearing the exact same, not even like a replica, but literally the same suit that Deontay Wilder was wearing when he got fucked up the armor.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, yeah. Izzy comes out in like a full Iron Man suit.
How did you even get that? Yeah. All right, guys. UFC 281 goes down this weekend. We are definitely going to be watching the fights. We're not going to be together. Sadly, I'm going to be on the road, but I will be watching them from afar. Trevor, I know you probably are going to be watching them here.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Glue yourself here under the blanket. No sound from anybody else. Nothing like that. So
I'm going to get a VR headset just to watch this fight.
I'm on the Meta Quest, baby.
Yeah.
All right, so definitely we'll see you guys next week to talk about the crazy card. Hopefully it's not as much of a dud as UFC 280 was.
You know what? I'll just say this. If this card is a total snoozer, all the fights are boring, you're going to see Dylan and I do heroin for the first time.
Yeah, and if Carla Esparza beats Zhang Wei Li, I will eat 100 pounds of raw pinto beans on the show next episode.
Next week's episode, I'm chasing the dragon, and you're eating pinto beans, and I'm just like, God damn it! Why are you making me do this?
Two different steaks. Yeah. We're both dying either way, though. All right, guys. Until next time, enjoy yourselves and the fights.